be very excited. And let's see, who wants to go first? Steph, can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Stéphanie Grandchamp-Dubé. I'm a senior UX designer at Behavior on Dead by Daylight. I mainly focus on accessibility work and stuff like that. My background is in game design and previously QA.
Okay. Next, Shiho, please introduce yourself.
Hi, hi, my name is Shiru. I am a lead experience designer on Skate at EA. Previously, I worked at Ubisoft and Square Enix Montreal, and I started the career as a UI designer. And yes, sorry.
Okay. And what should I call you? Cortana? But that's your I don't
Hi, yeah.
actually
Um, I go by many names on the internet, but my sort of real name is Joey Carpenter. Um, I'm currently freelance right now, but a lot of work that people will have touched that have created is I launched Destiny and Destiny 2 working as QA initially on the alpha and beta, and then I ended up helping launch the Destiny and Destiny 2 mobile companion apps along with their API integration and web integration, along with in-game UI and UX for Destiny 2. Lately, I've actually, like I said, been freelancing, but I also work for Penny Arcade as a PAX enforcer doing crowd control and fire safety, along with owning a cattle ranch where I do a lot of community outreach and safety planning and environmental work to respect the land that I am stewarding.
Okay. Yeah, that the last bit kind of surprised me, but
No, cows.
yeah, well,
That's extremely cool.
okay. Yeah, that is very cool. Yes, to be fair, yeah. Okay, so let's talk UX. So the first question is, how does UX differ from UI? Who wants to take this question first? So all of you will answer this question. Well, the three questions that we're gonna have, all the guests are gonna answer. But yeah, who wants to go first?
I guess since I had notes, I'll go first, and if anybody wants to interrupt me on the panel, that's totally cool too. Um,
Well, let's not interrupt each other.
okay.
Let's take
If
turns.
it's really important, or if I'm very wrong. So, in my experience, UI and UX, especially in games, are extremely intertwined, but they are different. It's kind of like how all bugs are classified as insects, but not all insects are classified as bugs. Um, and in theory and in practice, when we are building and talking about it, one requires the other. So, out of curiosity, I looked up a few takes on what the difference is, and I kept getting mad because all the lists were different, and a lot of the lists contradicted each other. And none of these takes are necessarily wrong. If you are working strictly on a mobile enterprise app, what is considered the UI discipline specialty versus the broader UX specialty, or something that's completely siloed off, can be different from diegetic UX design and UI design in a video game. The requirements are completely different, and I think that's what makes things difficult when you tell somebody, "Yeah, I'm a UX designer." They also assume you're also doing, UI art and icon design and graphic design and visual color theory. Um, but generally speaking, UI designers are go-to for your art, colors, visual fidelity, how pretty can we get things to go before we break our software. Um, these are, the professional artists in many senses. but you can make gorgeous interfaces that don't work. You'll see a lot of mockups on Dribble that are really cool, but if you look at those mockups as a UX designer, you realize like, how could this UI possibly work, on a slightly smaller phone or on a browser window that is not on a gigantic 4K screen? So UI designers have to keep all these accessibility and UX things in mind because there's a penchant for UX inherent to being a good and effective UI designer. Color combinations need to be legible. Fonts and use need to properly render on your platforms. They need to function with all of your languages. They need to update properly with visual and accessibility settings, like I said, bigger screens, larger text, different contrast modes, even just brightness. So interfaces also need to accommodate the dynamic content that they hold. Maybe it's stats, maybe it's a score, maybe it's, anything you can put in a string or an integer or a picture or an icon. Does it move? Do you have a cursor? Does an icon get bigger in a hover state? Will it break anything else? And, it's games, web, and mobile, and then all of the subsets of the problems within each platform, they have to react to different content on different devices for different scenarios. It's really hard to keep all of that in line on your own as a UI designer. And that's where UX really comes in. UX comes in and sometimes it is a lone UI designer doing this, but they become UX in this moment. You have to create a UI element library. You need to make sure that those elements are reusable for the rest of your product. You need to make sure they remain visually consistent while remaining functionally consistent. And already, this is going to require technical know-how for reactive UI to work. You either need to know the limitations or the capabilities of your engine, or you also need to know a bit of coding to do some hackery in your engine or be able to communicate properly with the engineer next to you. So already, we're touching UI, but we have already jumped across the pond to some pretty hardcore engineering where, you might have to talk to the kind of engineers that you wouldn't want touching Photoshop. But then specifically, if we go over to games UX in general, we are looking at somebody who stands in the middle of a very busy intersection, almost like a producer. So for a single feature on a game, let's say a game already exists, you are updating it to add this feature. Let's say this feature doesn't even show up during gameplay, or it can exist separately from it. So a full screen menu. A UX designer needs to consider the following. What data am I tasked with presenting to users? Am I guiding users to a different area of the product or game? How much data can I display at one time? How much data should I display at one time? So now you have to think, back when we were shipping Destiny 1, we could do a lot of really cool things on the PS4, but God forbid you even attempt it on one of the older consoles. Because even the 360 and PS3 had memory limitations for just UI elements. Those are just strings, but those strings are also attached to online statuses, stats that are updating in the background constantly. Everything's a bit heavier than you realize, especially working in AAA or something that connects to a server. You also have to ask.
Joey, I'm sorry. I need to cut you off.
Right.
We do have some limited time, so
Oh,
do you
yeah,
want
yeah.
to kind of wrap
Yeah,
up
yeah.
your thoughts so
Yeah,
we
all
can
right.
hand it
I'll
over
wrap
to
that up.
the next
Oh,
guest?
totally. So, taking all of that, you see where all these things intersect. A UX designer, well, I need to talk to art to make sure this looks good, but I need to probably talk to user research to make sure people even understand it. Then to fix that or to get a good foundation, I gotta talk to engineering. So that's kind of the non-answer of it's very intertwined, but it is different. And UX has a broader look at things that needs to be considered.
Thank you for your extremely thorough answer. Steph, you wanna take it from here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this was extremely accurate and detailed. It was a very good answer. For me, really, UX is more of about how you interact with the product, like its functionality. This is usually where you design the information architecture, and do the user research. So that's another job, also user researcher. That's something that could be close to UX if that's something that interests you. This is where you're going to do the prototyping and the wireframes. That's where you're going to establish what the goal of the product is. So oftentimes you're going to work with the product team and figure out what they want. Usually they're going to have a problematic for you or a need, and you'll figure out the answer. You're going to see if the product is comfortable to use, are there any friction, and is it accessible mostly. UI, I can't speak for UI. I can describe it, but I'm not a UI designer. I'm not an artist. This is really more about the visual style and branding, color theory, and typography. Something I do find quite important, since this is a break into the industry talk, for people who are looking to get into UX or UI. Um, I would say be wary of companies asking you to like advertising positions as UI-UX. They are two jobs. Those are two completely different, separate jobs, and it takes the time to do one properly. And sometimes, if they ask you to wear both hats at the same time, I know it can happen in smaller projects, but it's a lot of work. So it kind of it can be worth focusing on one and making sure you're compensated for the work that you do. Really, that would be my point of view on this.
Thank you, Steph. Okay, Shiho, what
Yes.
have we missed?
Uh, what was your original question, Marcel?
What is the difference between UX and UI?
Okay, so I think the UI design is a part of UX design, but not all of them. In our industry, which is game industry, it's a very still new, and many people think UX designers are someone who makes many wireframes for game designers, for example. But I'm not going to talk for other companies, other project, but for our project, UX designer works very closely with game designers, and there's some UX designer works for UI assets, making wireframe, working closely with UI designers, but the other UX designers actually on the feature for user experience and work closely with game designer. I used to be a UI designer, but when game design come to UI design, I have only choice to use like icons, text to explain gameplay. But right now, because I am UX designer, so gameplay signs and feedback can be done by UI and sound effect, visual effect, and animation sometimes, and it's affect very closely to accessibility. So it depends on the company, to be honest. But the first question, that UI designers are different from UX designers, and UX designers are um, partially game design and partially UI design. And yeah, uh, like Stephanie said, it's not something that we can do both UI and UX in same time. And some company ask to do like UI UX design, but for those companies, I think you can only do a UI part of UX design, but not all of the UX user experience design of the game.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. What was our next question? I have lost my list. Hold on just a second. Shoot, what was okay? So kind of pivoting more towards the kind of practically what is required for juniors to kind of break into the industry. Now that we've established what UX is, what do you look for in a portfolio for a junior UX designer? Let's this time maybe Shiho, you can start.
Sure. So I see a lot of portfolio from outside of the game industry, but for game UX designer, I would probably want to see some kind of game UX design in portfolio. If you have no chance to work on video game, you can just create your own UX for existing games. And the competitor analysis can be also interesting to see if you have a good eye to catch UX problem. For AAA games, many junior designers bring up the design of famous and best-selling games as great examples, but best-selling AAA games can have a bad UX design. So I will probably check if you have skills to find the problem in those big games too. For indie or small production, I will see if this person can wear multiple hats. It's still very rare to have dedicated UX designers for indie games. You might have to work as UI designers and even run your own tests. So that's the thing that I would probably want to see portfolio and maybe during the interviews.
Okay. Steph, what would you like to see in portfolios when you're interviewing juniors?
Yeah, my answer is quite similar to Shiho actually. I really like the evaluation of a game. So take a game that already exists and find a usability issue, and then you explain why it's an issue and how you could fix it. You can provide interactive prototypes, micro interactions that give visual feedback for the user's actions. Those I really like. I'm mostly looking for subjectivity. Objectivity, sorry. So being subjective is a red flag in this case. So you want to make sure that you come from a scientific approach and um, so not like I won't necessarily look for a UX portfolio. It could be a game design portfolio or even a graphic design one. They're both good and they can both show a good UX thinking process. So those are also fine for me. I've recently hired a junior who was fresh out of game design school, and their portfolio was mostly game design, but they showed a very good UX thinking process during the interview. Um, they were quite objective in the criticism that they had towards the game, and that was really interesting. So same if you proceed through an interview or you're being asked to do a test. I'm personally not for tests for UX positions. I don't think they're necessarily useful, but if you're asked to do those or even an interview, I think it's okay to keep in mind that you can say that you don't know. If you're asked a question, it's okay to not know everything. I'm looking for people that are curious in their design thinking, and to me, it's really more about how you communicate your thought process rather than having the right answer for everything.
Okay. Joey.
All right. So this is definitely adding like conveniently just perfectly adding on top to what um Steph and Shiho said. So a lot of what I look for is how do you show your work and how do you communicate it? Because in UI and UX, like I mentioned, you are going to interact with other disciplines. So take, a whatever random UI example or UX or feature example you've made up for your portfolio, even just for fun, and add tag it up with comments as though you're going to hand it off to somebody. Show your work, like make sure you say like, hey, like this is not just a full fidelity mock-up that I'm handing over. Show me the bare bones of it. what does an engineer need to know about your design? Hey, this is going to be a full screen UI. Here are the tabs. Here's what's going to be in the tabs. Not just examples of that data. You know, like here is the armor tab. Here's the weapon tab. Act as though this is going to a coworker. I had a note in here. You can also do things like take, existing UI from other games and create a new challenge or a new twist on it. Something I like to do is almost create a wireframe out of it. What's the most minimum viable information I can get out of this and still figure out where I need to go? So I like to do grayscale designs where not even grayscale, sorry, black and white, where there is no gradient. So act like this is printed off a Xerox machine from the 70s. I'm going to take the Destiny UI and we don't get any transparency. We don't get any different colors to explain what level or what tier a piece of armor is. How do we do this with the least amount of stuff, with the least amount of shiny things, and have it still make sense? It's a really good exercise to show that you can make really precise methods of communicating something to players while maintaining the fidelity of information that other designers give you. That was a little roundabout, but in essence, I like to see what are weird experiments. You don't have to do a whole grand UI library suite to prove that you can do it. I just want to see can you create things without reinventing the wheel every time? Do you know how to reuse stuff? Do you know how to make something as simple as possible in the first place? So when we add visual fidelity, that's just the cake, or that's just the cherry on top for a user to take in data.
Okay. Let's move on to our next question. What is something someone can do to improve their odds of landing their first job in UX? Steph, I don't think you've gone first. So, Steph.
Oh, I think people are not gonna like my answer because it's it's pretty realistic. Yeah.
That's why we're
Um,
here. It's
uh,
we're here to tell the harsh truth.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is valid for pretty much any type of dev job, any opportunities. It's 90% of it is luck, being at the right place at the right time. Lots of people work really hard, have really good portfolio, and apply everywhere, and it can take time to get a job. It's not your fault. It's an industry problem. It's hard. Um, don't beat yourself up too much. It's normal, but it's a network heavy industry. So I know it's not always easy, especially for different type of people, some minorities. It's not always easy to do some PR work for yourself and go out there and be part of communities. Sometimes we have some barriers that other people don't have, so that can be hard. But do join Discords, communities, connect with other devs. There's a lot of that. Be patient. Just it's gonna happen, but it can take some time. And yeah, that's my main thing. I'm sorry. I'm a bit of a downer of this one, but that's my main thing. Yeah.
And don't feel bad. Like this is a difficult subject, like this
Yeah.
is an extremely competitive industry, and even the most qualified people frequently have a hard time getting that foot in the
Absolutely.
door. So yeah, um don't get discouraged, but yeah, it do acknowledge that it is a tough it's a tough road. Shiho.
Yes, it's a very good question. And yes, it is very difficult. And especially for UXO, like different company or even different project has a different needs and different standards. So I suggest to read well the job description and to prepare for the interview, because every UX design jobs are different. Um, for big companies like EA, Ubisoft, we take co-op and internship, and mainly when we have good intern and co-ops, like we give full time as a junior, so that's the easiest way to get in. We also hire from outside of game industry, but most of them are coming to work for us as an intermediate to seniors. For previous company that I worked, which is Ubisoft, we had a lot of people convert from game design to UX designers, like Stephanie. But EA, we have also a lot of people converting from UI designer to UX designer. At EA specifically, we are called XD, Experience Designer. So we are in same group of same team, same group, but we have a specialization for UX and UI. Yeah, even though, like I said, UX are not actually UI, I feel like UI design is are easier to get into UX design position because every UI needs to think about user experience too.
Okay.
Okay. Oh.
Oh.
Okay, Jerry, go.
Okay. I thought you were just waiting. I'm like,
Oh no,
So
I
I'm
was gonna swing it to you, but
Oh.
you picked it up before I had to, so
I'm
take it away.
fine. Okay. I'm gonna start with something that you should not do. Don't let anybody convince you that you need to be a UX unicorn. By that I mean there are anywhere from indies to even some AAA places that think they can get away with convincing people that it is totally acceptable to hire on somebody and with the expectation of having them do cradle to ship UX work on top of UI art, on top of any amount of like icon graphic design stuff, because that's items in the hundreds, on top of engine implementation, on top of part-time scripting to get your engine implementation to work. Do not let anybody do that to you. You can know all these things, you can be very good at these things, but it will burn you out. It will make you feel like you're losing your mind. It is way too many things to juggle for one person unless you just have all the time
That
in
is
the world.
insane.
I've had
That's like so
I've had
many different jobs.
I've had potential employers try to argue. Obviously I did not accept or get an offer from these people after arguments, but I had to argue back being like, you're not going to find anybody if you're going to spring this on me and be like, oh, you're a great senior level, lead level UX designer. Could you please also do all the graphic design? Like, can you please also make this expansive, consistent, professional art? No, I can't. On top of, can you please do engine implementation? Like, I know how the engine works, but I do not have time, even if I'm waiting for something to compile or new builds to come in, to do UX in between and then get 500 icons for items in the meantime. That's impossible. That's the crazy end of things, or the absurd end of things, but don't let anybody trick you into that. Now that said, I started out in QA, and I do not believe that QA should be treated as a stepping stone. But if you are struggling to find UX work, especially as a beginner, QA is an excellent proving ground, especially if you go from pretty early in development through release candidate process. You kind of become the SEAL Team 6 of everything that's happening in the game. UX and QA know where the bodies are buried. We know the bugs that will not be fixed that we just kind of have to bury and hope to God nobody
That's so
stumbles
true.
on it. They know where the bodies are buried, and when I crunched on Destiny, I learned everything from sound to networking to multiplayer to security to GOps. And that is why I feel I'm as good a designer as I am is because of that experience. And so consider taking some QA contracts. Learn that jargon, and then on top of that, study literature and talks from existing designers inside and outside of games. Everybody and their mom is going to recommend to you the design of everyday things, pretty much anything from Don Norman. Well, he's not the be-all end-all. I think his books will lay a fantastic foundation for any kind of designer, be it gameplay, rewards systems, or general UX. Take that time to get the basics down. You gotta read the classics and learn our jargon. Read Celia Hoden's books. She has a lot of game-specific UX verbiage that, as you're interviewing with folks, you're going to be able to relate to them and to communicate with them better, to show that I may be junior, I might not have had a design role yet, but I know what I'm talking about. Like, I'm already, this is not a fresh-faced person who has potential. I've got potential, and I've already got the chops to back it up. You don't have to tell me twice, when I join on. That's very important. And you can prove a lot of that with QA experience. You can prove a lot of that with cool, you know, design challenges on existing items. You can implement that to show I'm already walking the walk and talking the talk. Now give me a task and give me a challenge. And I know that's a very broad way to talk about it because there are so many possibilities of things you can do. You can even do design analysis on a lamp for all I care. How many meetings had to happen because of the lampshade that was chosen for the shitty lamp off Amazon? Sorry, I shouldn't curse so much. Everything is design. UX is in everything. And that's why you will touch everything. So start looking at the world with UX as well, and it will show up in your practice, in your portfolio, and in how you interact with your coworkers and projects, no matter what your discipline or role is, and everybody is going to appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Surprisingly, we're actually ahead of time. So we have quite a bit of time to take user questions or listener questions.
Yeah.
Catherine, do we already have a list?
So we're going to take questions now. So you can write them down in the chat. And we'll just take them one at a time until we run out of time. Chris, so we won't be inviting our audience to speak. Please write your question if you have one in the chat. Very quickly.
This is a good one.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a good one. Do you know if there are any... Oh, it moved. Do you know if there are any game UX design portfolios that can be viewed online? Anyone?
Yeah, so
Anyone have that one?
I have, my pool is a little biased, but folks like Elliot Gray, I think McKay Clark. McKay Clark did a lot of the original work for the cursor and the director, whatnot, for the original Destiny. He pioneered and then did a lot of engineering for that first iteration that we launched with. And then if you look at Elliot Gray, he's more on the art side, but working with him, yeah, mckayclark.com, and I need to find Elliot's. And if you look at who they are mutuals with, you'll find a lot of other UX designers, not just within Bungie, but across Epic and Respawn. A lot of those folks will have their portfolio sites and their bios. And you'll see all the different approaches to how people do that. Some people have little videos of really cool, interaction animations that are really effective in guiding users to where they need to be, or kind of like, hey, here's this really effective like haptic thing I do with some audio that kind of sparks joy when you get a reward or when something works, or you're about to just you've gone through boot flow and now you've hit start. Just cute little iconic things, kind of those cherry toppers, and then here's my huge expansive project that I did. Kind of just a little bit of Twitter stalking will go a long way. And I like to, whenever I'm working on my site, I like to bookmark those guys for inspiration of like, how do people want to display their stuff? What are people proud of? What do they feel is most important? And you'll see a lot of variety, I think. So don't feel like, you have to do a gigantic, New Yorker write up of every little thing you do. Some things are self-explanatory. Some things you need to bring out the big guns and, explain to me like I'm 5 how this design works and how you got here. But yeah, those are 2 big ones. Yeah, Elliot Gray, McKay Clark, my personal heroes. So I can also get a better list later that we can post. Just a little repository of portfolios that I have bookmarked on my MacBook, just not the computer I'm on right now.
So let's do a we'll do a follow-up where we're gonna post some stuff. So yes, Catherine, maybe
Hello,
we
yeah.
can coordinate that somewhere.
Do you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay. I think I was muted earlier. Okay, let's look for other questions.
Oh, I like this one. Do you need a graphic design degree for UI UX?
No,
No.
not for UX. Not for UX.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah. I'm probably the least artistic person ever. I cannot draw. My wireframes are very ugly. It's not part of my job to make pretty interfaces. So no,
Yeah.
not at all.
It's more like you have to know what you have in this menu instead of how you go. Like we have specialists, like UI designers. On my project is a specialized for that graphic design skills. So no, I don't think you need graphic design skill, but there was already some university having UX design courses. That would be more interesting for UX designers.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
the bare
ahead,
minimum,
Joy.
I was going to say, the bare minimum, look at some cool, like, history of graphic design books or visual essays, just to get a sense of, what is, because I think if you specifically want to also be doing graphic design with your UI, that's when you might need a degree or at least, a strong portfolio to show that you can put out shippable art. But otherwise, just do like a tourist experience of, what is this specific art discipline about? What are the principles of it? Because even if you're not doing that level and fidelity of art, it's extremely helpful to know, what are their standards, what's their method of thinking, and how are they approaching, the ideas of color and contrast in ways that as a layman I would not understand.
Nice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's keep going.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So
okay,
before we begin,
I have a combo question.
Hey,
Oh, go ahead.
hello. Yeah. Before we move on, there was 2 questions asking for the books that that were mentioned. Cortana, could you repeat them for us?
I think someone is searching for them in chat.
Yeah.
I think they mentioned Don Norman.
Yeah.
Don't make me. Don't make me think. No, that's the Steve Krug one. So don't make me think is Steve Krug. The design of everyday things by Don Norman. I think that was the other one. Gamer's Brain by Celia Hodent. Those were a few that were mentioned. There it is.
Cool. Thank you so much. Okay, we can move on. I just wanted that out
Okay.
of the way.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, so this is kind of like a combo question because there's two like questions that are next to each other. I think that would go really well. The first one is, my wife is starting her UX journey, but she's intimidated to get started. Should she start with paper mockups or just jump into Figma? And the second question is, what are the most common tools you all use in your daily process, such as Figma? So maybe we can answer those together. Shiho, you want to start?
It's really depends on the project too. Like, sorry, my answer is always depends on the project. But I think industries are going more to Figma right now. Like, especially for my project, we use Figma, and we need someone really expertise Figma. It's a new, and every week or month they have an update, and they are still adding a lot of content. It's very powerful too.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they mentioned that paper design because I still do those sometimes. Sometimes it's just easier, like on a paper with a pen, just sketching an idea. Um, Personally, for work, I use Adobe XD because we use the Adobe suite, but they're all fine. Figma is a very popular one. So those are always good to learn, and they're kind of similar all between them. So once you know one, it's not super hard to go to another one. But paper design is absolutely fine to start. I've presented some portfolio pieces that were pictures of pieces of paper with actual paper design on them. That's completely fine to start.
Yeah, I'm gonna third Figma. It's definitely the industry darling right now. And the same like Steph mentioned Adobe XD. Like once you learn one of those pretty well, it's relatively easy to hop into another. They all follow um the principles of, layers and groups and pretty simple information architecture, at least with like how things show up on the screen. And once you just get adept and comfortable with one of them, um, it'll make things go a lot smoother. But a big thing when you are learning tools or just trying to, how people ask, how do I become a good artist? And people are like, you gotta make a lot of bad art first and throw it away. Kind of the same with designs. So if it's easier for you to quickly sketch out an idea, notice it's not working out and throw it in the trash. I mean the recycling. Do that first, because if you're struggling and like in Figma for now, and it takes you 10 minutes to make one button that you like, you're not going to want to get rid of that button as you practice. So definitely also make time for whatever medium you feel like you will most frequently be willing to throw everything out. Um, don't spin your wheels on one tool. If you're kind of hitting a mental block while you're trying to learn it, go back, to something that feels a bit smoother, a bit natural to you, and then learn the functionality of a tool in a separate kind of session. You want to balance that time of, I want to do a lot of awful designs so I can understand what not to do, but I also need to learn this tool. You need to balance those.
Okay. Um, let's see. Next question is, could you give us a brief day in life list of what you do in a day? Chiho, you want to start?
Yes. Right now, on my project, I work as a manager, so a lot of time I spending is meeting, running. I do also have some feature that I work on, so I am more specialized for gameplay UX design. So I work very close to game designers. So yeah, another meeting with game designers and writing a lot of design documentation with them. I said Figma for tools, but it's for more people work on menus and HUD. My part needs to go beyond UIs. So we write a documentation in Confluence mainly. So that's my work.
Yeah, I can.
Joey. Oh,
Sorry.
oh, sorry. I
You,
No,
you
no, no,
should
go
go
ahead.
ahead,
you
Steph.
should go.
It's
There's
okay.
a
It's
dog
okay. You
barking and I
started.
got distracted.
Wait, should I go?
Go.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, no, I was gonna joke that I spend most of my day in meetings, but that's not completely accurate. There are a lot of meetings, depending on your level of seniority and the teams that you work with. Same as Shiho, I work with the game designers quite a bit, because they're obviously to make sure that their gameplay is UX compliant, but also meetings with the teams that are currently implementing my designs that I've designed in the past. So there's a lot of overlooking features that are currently being implemented in the build, reviewing those. When I have new features coming up, it's research, writing up documentation, looking at other games, how they do things, talking with user research, talking with UI artists also, to show them some mockups so we can see where we're going with this. So it's a lot of collaboration. Also, lots of meetings with programmers to have them scope my features. So lots of meetings, lots of talking to people.
Yeah, emphasizing.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Um,
Joey.
yeah, emphasizing a lot of interfacing with other folks. Saying like, hey, where are we? What do you need? Um, is the design we have greenlit still working? Is a big one. Um, and it also depends on what stage of a project you're in or what stage of a dev cycle for a feature you're in. If we are pre-production or planning stage, you're going to have to take a lot of time to learn about the system or gameplay feature or data that your UI and subsequent, UX will be servicing. So I was working on Gambit and I had to learn the ins and outs of all of it to understand, the people who are creating Gambit, working on the game feel and the gameplay and the stats. What are their goals? What do they feel the player needs to know and when? What are they afraid of? Are they afraid that players won't understand something? Are they afraid that they won't notice something and then have a bad experience? What are the non-negotiable things that other designers have for their features that I need to accommodate? So that's a big part of, pre-production. Before we put pen to paper, it's taking a lot of notes. It's getting to understand perhaps, types of design that, still go over my head. Investment systems are wilder than than I ever thought. But then, there's still that interfacing as we go through in further in that cycle. Hey, here's a solution. Here's a prototype. Here's an interactive prototype. And now, on top of presenting it to a designer, you're going to present it to producers, creative directors, essentially the stakeholders who approve it. And those stakeholders, they need something quick and precise and something that instills confidence so they can greenlight something. So it takes a lot of refinement in communication and documentation to make sure everybody is speaking the same language and on the same page. Creative directors, designers, artists, engineers speak different languages at different technical levels. And we need to make sure that every technical level feels heard and understood and safe in what we are going to build. But we also need to make sure we're not simplifying it too much that we forget important things or edge cases in our designs. And that I forgot that last thought, but essentially that. So it really depends on where are we in the process. Is there an emergency blocker that we built it halfway and realized our engine is not capable of a certain thing, or we just don't have time to build it? How do we pivot? And then so you almost go all the way back to the beginning sometimes, but in emergency mode, and then you have to speed run it. That's typically more a AAA problem, but these are all things to consider.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Catherine, I think you had a suggestion.
Yeah. So someone asks if there are any good UX mentorships or courses that you would recommend.
The silence is so loud.
Yeah. So
Nothing. We have
nothing.
no
Oh my
suggestions.
God.
I
Perfect.
mean,
No notes.
I personally don't know those much. I don't really have any experience with them, so that's not going to be for me for sure. Sorry.
Is Catherine talk? I didn't hear anything what she
Oh,
said.
hello, hello,
Yeah, I didn't
hello,
hear. I didn't hear.
hello,
Yeah,
hello. So
Okay, you
do you?
can't
I
hear
could hear
Catherine?
you.
I can't hear
I can
Kathleen
hear Catherine.
talking.
Okay, well, I'll I'll repeat what she said. Are there any good UX mentorships or programs that
Oh,
you would recommend?
very difficult. There's a lot in like overall industry app, web design. Video games are very specific and I don't know. But if you have time, like there's a UX summit, a game UX summit, and there's a lot of video coming from game UX summit. So that will be interesting to watch.
Joey, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, so a lot of the boot camps and courses you're going to see advertised online are going to be um, more for folks that work in like enterprise or stuff like Amazon apps and whatnot. You're seldom going to find a course that's specific to games. And so it's kind of hard to suggest any, uh, especially when it might get too broad. It might set weird expectations. My suggestion would be if you see a course online, see if you can get it for free first. And then there's a lot of check out like the GDC YouTube channel and stuff like that. Uh, a lot of the stuff is a bit higher level than, getting into UX, but it will help you figure out like what are new paths I can investigate, what are other resources you can look into. Uh, I did I recommended those books by Celia that I think are also just excellent places to start, and I think you can get them as ebooks. But yeah, definitely don't feel like you have to pay for a boot camp. Don't feel like you need to be an expert in these very rigid standards. Like for a while I was trying to, because I was working on the Destiny app, like I was like, oh, I need to learn material design for Android and I need to learn this and I need to learn the Apple standards. And it's like, don't worry about that. This is not law school. Um Plus you can always look it up. This life is now an open book test, and chances are there's a nerd somewhere who has memorized, certain design standards for a very certain platform or a certain game genre that will help you out or will know a resource for you to look. But yeah, don't get too caught up in it. Don't sweat that too hard. Free stuff, the fundamentals are great, just to get going. But again, they're not going to be very accommodating or even really acknowledge games.
Yeah, as you said earlier, the books are honestly better than anything of these courses you could find online. They're more than enough. And we do a lot of Googling in our day to day. So don't worry about it. Just read the classics and you'll be fine. When I look at a portfolio or a resume, I don't really look at what school you went to or what program or what online course you did. I don't really care much about those.
I think that's typical in job hiring.
Yeah.
People don't really care where you went to school.
Yeah, exactly.
They really don't.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have.
Yeah. So does everyone hear me now? Am I being heard?
I hear you.
I hear you,
Yeah.
I don't.
but I think we're the two people that hear
Oh my
you.
gosh.
So
Okay. So for people that do hear me,
I
thank you
can
so much.
repeat what you say.
Yeah. So
Catherine
thank you
says,
so
thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you so much for tuning in. This wraps up our UX
Thank
panel.
you so much, Catherine. I don't know if you're talking right now. I just keep looking for the mute icon to come up.
Oh my god.
Thank you.
She said, thank you very much for tuning in. This is our UX. That's all the time we have for our UX roundtable.
Thank you so much for
Uh,
having
Thank you.
us.
what do we say? Please tune in for the next roundtable and all the other fun and amazing stuff that happens on the Work with Indies Discord. And for everyone that couldn't be here that you know of, make sure to recommend that you listen to that they listen to this conversation on over at Twitch where it's been clipped,
Or YouTube.
or YouTube.
Thank you, everyone.
Is Catherine talking right now? I can't tell.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I'll
And
also
have
send
a
you
lovely
resources.
day.
Thanks so
To
much, guys.
post later. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, and follow these amazing people on Twitter for all the things. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.